Welcome to Vivarium, the podcast that propels church planting in Spain. Vivarium, Latin for place of life. This is a place where through the interviews, through conversations, we propel church planting. We believe it's the most life-giving place you can be a part of in the mission God has entrusted you. So welcome today. Welcome to Vivarium, the podcast that propels church planting in Spain. I am very excited today. We have a very special guest with us, Dr. Michael Cooper. We have known each other for about a little bit over 3 years.
Could be, yeah.
Welcome, Michael.
Wonderful to be here.
So good to have you.
Yeah. Well, it's so fun to sit across you in person. So much of our time together is on Zoom or in some other way, but nice to be face to face.
That's true. That's true. It's so good to have you here in Spain, in Madrid, real time, real live, and what a treat to have you here at our podcast today. Before we go on, I would like to say a few words about Dr. Cooper. One of the things I have been most impressed with is the passion he transpires for Jesus and for his mission, but also the combination of the depth and breadth theologically that he contributes with missiologically. He's a missiologist. He's married to Lori. They have 3 children and 2 grandchildren. They live in Michigan currently.
Yep.
In terms of training, he's a graduate of Texas A&M, environmental design. Then he moved on and earned a master from Columbia Biblical Seminary and School of Missions, and then earned a PhD at Trinity Evangelical Divinity School. I'd love to hear a little more about that. He's a practitioner. He is not only an academic, which is an amazing contribution to what we all are doing on mission, but he is a practitioner. He focuses on missiological research and equipping missionaries for effective cultural engagement. With more than 30 years of experience on mission, church planting in Romania, equipping and training others in Africa, Europe, North America, South America, South Asia, Southeast Asia. I think the only place left here is Greenland.
I don't know. Do we want to talk
Have you been there yet?
I have not been there yet.
Well, It could be a one of our next places on mission, Michael. Let's get ready for that. In terms of service, he serves as a resident missiologist for East West. We are colleagues at East West as well. And it's a privilege to have that be part of our friendship and relationship, as well as a consultant for several entities and mission agencies. Teaches in different mission and theological schools internationally, but also serves as a professor. And you have also a very strategic role, right, at Kairos University, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. Yeah.
We will provide all the different links so you can go into detail on Dr. Cooper's experience, Dr. Cooper's expertise, and his experience. There's a lot of really neat stuff. He has actually written or contributed to more than 30 books and academic articles. And one highlight I want to mention, we will go a little bit more into detail later, but he has written a bestseller book called Efesiología. It's a study of God's movement out of Ephesus and everything that bloomed and blossomed from there, where we are, I would say, still till this day, fruit of those ripple effects.
Absolutely.
And it's a bestseller by William Carey Publishing. But also within Efesiología, it's not only a book, but it's a platform of resources, of training and consulting, and different approaches and bibliographies that you can benefit from. And finally, I think I can go on and on, but I want to say this in case at the end we have some time to move into this. But his recent interests are in 3 topics: church fathers, missiological theology, and movement ecclesiology. Did I miss anything relevant, Michael, that you would like to?
Well, I'm sure we're going to get into a little bit of archaeology, because that's become the 4th pillar, if you will, of a lot of what I do.
Okay. Wow. Wonderful. So archaeology, let's keep that in mind. If I forget, team, Kevin, thank you for being here. Sonia, please remind me so we can talk about this. Let's move into the topic of today. I know you have researched quite a bit on movements, ecclesiology, ecclesiological movements across history, and it really impressed me to hear a little bit about your personal story with Jesus, how Jesus encounters you in those university years, and there's a fire that revolutionizes your life, and all these university students that are coming to Christ. Church planting movements, you think about that word and it's daunting and it's big, but I was thinking of your personal story. What can you say about the movement that starts in the heart of an individual?
What a great question. Yeah. And it really does start there, doesn't it? It's that relationship that we have with Christ, that we come to the point and realize that we're all in, and because he's been all in for us. And it just compels us to do things that we know that he would do. I like to describe it in I talk about it as a terminus technis. We do Jesus-y things, once he captures our heart. And that's what movements really are about, is trying to emulate what our Savior did while he was here. He's given us a model for that. He's shown us what it looks like, and it's living that out. And living that out wherever we are. And for me, I think that first really grabbed my attention while I was at the university. And this was a long time ago, Miguel. You and I are seasoned people now. But back in the 80s, I was involved with the ministry of Campus Crusade for Christ. It was known then, Cru now.
Correct.
And
Agape in Europe.
You?
Agape.
Agape, yes,
Europe,
yes,
it's
yes,
agape.
yeah.
Or
That's
in Spain
right.
as
That's
well.
right.
Agape.
That's right. So I was involved with that. Actually, I came to Christ in the ministry of Cru when I was in high school. And I don't think I really understood what it was about in high school. I don't think we understand a whole lot in high school, do we?
We're into other things.
Yeah, right. But by the time I got to the university, I understood what it meant to not just to develop in my relationship with the Lord, but to see that relationship was more than just simply me sitting alone quietly somewhere in devotion to him, but living out that devotion in relationship with others, with friends of mine, but also with those who didn't know who Christ was. And so I was honored to be a part of a rather large campus ministry back in the 80s at Texas A&M.
Wow.
And we didn't have the language of movements, I don't think, then, like we do today. But we were seeing multiplication. We were discipling people. Our disciples were discipling other people. And that just kept going to be a very dynamic movement in the 1980s.
Yeah, it really caught my attention reading those portions on your almost like autobiographical stories that you were sharing in your book about your story with Jesus, your personal story with Jesus, and it made me think it's pretty amazing. I was reading you and I was thinking, that's why I thought of movement at a micro level, at the heart of an individual, because I was almost seeing you just come alive and saying, I have encountered, or this God who is majestic, who is great, who is loving, has found me. I cannot keep it to myself.
Yeah.
I need to tell others and equip others as I am seeing that Jesus was doing. No?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that rolled me into a career of trying to do that same thing. How successful that's been, I mean, that is up to the Lord, I suppose. But I think what he requires of us is faithfulness. And so faithfully following him and doing the things that he did and trying to emulate that so others see it as well is something that was a passion of mine. And actually moved me out of the realm of architecture. That was my undergraduate degree in architecture. And I still love architecture, and so thankful that these days, as I do work in the field of archaeology, that I still dabble in a little bit of ancient architecture. But moving out of architecture into missions in the later period of the 80s was very formative for me, and how I was thinking about, what does ministry look like? What does multiplication look like? What later, using the movement language, what does movement really look like?
So the terms were not there, you're saying, that same language was not there. When do you encounter, I mean, it looks like part of your experience, but so when do you encounter or when do you bump into movement and get intrigued by it?
Yeah. Well, that's a challenging one. So it's in the 90s that David Garrison comes out with his book on church planting movements.
Okay.
I didn't know about it. I mean, in the 90s, Lori and we lived in Romania. We were doing church planting, and we were seeing multiplication. We did it in a traditional way. That was the way that we knew how to do church planting back then. But what was different from what we did was that we were able to integrate what we were doing with Campus Crusade in multiplying disciples and seeing them build up in the Lord and sent out to make more disciples. We saw that happening in the first church that we started in 1990 in Romania. And that was a model that we tried to replicate wherever we were doing church planting. It wasn't until later that we discovered, we're doing a disciple-making movement here, and we didn't even know that that's what you were supposed to call it. And so those were interesting times. They were fun times. They were challenging times. Things don't always go well in church planting, as we both know. But they were times when we were committed to being faithful to the Lord and working out what we knew to be ministry, and to see people come to Christ and to see them discipled and multiply and win other people to Christ.
Wow. What an experience. Church planting in Romania. Makes me think of another aspect you touch on in your book, missiological exegesis.
Yeah.
You mentioned that it is so important, and it was so instrumental for Paul back in his days, wherever he went in his church planting efforts, on his missionary journeys. And you talk about three aspects there on missiological exegesis.
Yeah.
Which I think is key for any church planter that goes into a small town in Spain, maybe an urban center, in the different corners of this nation. What can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, what is
missiological exegesis? What is that?
What is this missiological exegesis? We used to talk about it as cultural exegesis,
Okay.
but I'm a missiologist, so everything has missiology connected to it. So instead of cultural exegesis, I talk about missiological exegesis, because in cultural exegesis, what we think about is trying to understand what is happening in the culture. But when we begin to integrate the missiology here, it demands a response. So missiological exegesis just doesn't stay on the cultural level. It's looking at understanding culture, observing what's going on, dialoguing with the people and culture, but moving that information into a way and into a place where we can actually do something with it. That's the missiology side to this. So when I talk about missiological exegesis, it's observing deeply what's happening in culture, not just a cursory observation, but deep into culture. What's happening in communities? How do people gather? When they gather, what is it that they're doing? What do families find important? How are they knit together? And then understanding that through dialogue with people, making sure that the observations that we're making about the culture actually are the correct observations. And taking that information and moving it then to what I've called missiological reflection.
Okay.
What do we do with this information now? If this is really how the culture is acting, so what? Now what? How do we move that information from just simply being information to actually using it to engage people with the gospel?
How important? How important? I mean, you have a process here, and I love to hear some examples where you see this in Scripture happen. But starting with that observation, and you're saying deep observation,
Deep.
not superficial,
Right.
and not they do this, I'm gonna do this, but deeper. Why are they doing this? No, and then moving into those dialogues with the people you're wanting to minister to. And then finally moving into this reflection. You had also, in the book, you mentioned something about history as well, knowing the history of the place.
Absolutely. No? Absolutely. So a part of knowing a culture is knowing where people come from. Okay. And it's even more than history. It's knowing their history. It's knowing their philosophy. Mm-hmm. What is it that animates people? What's their music like? How do they tell stories? All of those things become important in our observations of culture. And Paul is a great model of this. We look at Acts 17 so often when he's in Athens. And as Luke tells that story, that we see Paul observing. The English doesn't do this well. I'm not sure how the Spanish does. It probably says it much more profoundly, but English says that Paul saw in the city that it was full of idols. And that Greek word for see, or the past tense saw, is theoreo. And it means it's a deep observation. Not just, I noticed this was here, but the detail of it. Why is it here? How are people attracted to this? And so it's going beyond just that cursory seeing of something to noticing the detail of it. And this is what we see of Paul. He notices the detail of what's happening in the city of Athens. It's full of idols. And Luke tells us that his spirit is provoked within him. And I think this is very important for us to understand. Because what we will come to see with the Apostle Paul, that in spite of the fact that his spirit is provoked, so Paul's a Jew, right? He sees all these idols. That is not going to make him happy. And yet when he begins to engage people in dialogue, he's not saying, he's not taking the Bible saying, why are you believing this? Wow. You're going to hell. What you do is demonic. But instead he comes to them out of respect And when we see him moving into the Areopagus with the philosophers, he says, "Men of Athens, I have observed that you are very religious."
Amazing.
And so he's paying them respect. And that's so critical when we think about what it is that we're observing.
Amazing. He kept his frustration and probably dealt with it with God.
Yeah.
No, it seems to me, listening to you.
Sure.
At the light of the text. And then when he goes to people, he goes with respect.
Yep.
I would say as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's Paul's heart, isn't it? And so we see him moving from that observation to dialogue in the marketplace. The Greek here is dialegomai. So he's not preaching in the marketplace, but he's engaging in conversations.
Wow.
And, it's interesting because there's a parallel here that Luke is attempting to draw between Paul's ministry and the work of Socrates, for example.
Okay.
Because Socrates did the same thing. He famously said that the streets of Athens are my classroom.
Oh,
and so he would walk the streets of Athens making observations and dialoguing with people to understand.
Wow.
And then, of course, he would get into this Socratic way of questioning and engaging and so on.
What a great approach, missiological approach, Michael, for church planters.
Oh, absolutely.
To move, as you move and do life, see it as a constant classroom.
Yep, absolutely.
What an amazing approach.
Yeah. Well,
you're learning how, like you're saying, what animates people, what's their heartbeat, what moves them, what drives them. No?
Yeah. And in that dialogue, trying to understand, to put it all together. And what I love about that passage in Acts 17 with Paul in Athens is that we not only see him making the observations, having the dialogue, but we get a real sense of how that dialogue begins to evolve. And the relationship then that occurs with the philosophers especially. And out of respect, as I mentioned, he says, "I see that you're very religious." And that's so important for us when we're in our cultures to not just, look at the bad things and degrade a culture. I was with some dear brothers in Kathmandu, Nepal, several years ago. And they were really struggling and wrestling with, how do we do movement here? What does it look like? And one of the brothers said to me, he said, 3 of my disciples, I sent them out to a Buddhist village. They went into the village. They began to proclaim the gospel and declare Jesus as God. And when they got to the village, they saw the Buddhist flags waving in the air. And they began to tell the people in the village, "You are worshiping demons."
Whoa.
And do you know what the response of the people was?
They went after them.
They went after them.
Yeah.
Actually, with cane poles. They went after them and chased them out of the city. And I looked at our brother and I said, I believe it.
Wow.
The disrespect that they showed to those people.
Looks like they burned some bridges.
Yeah. This was not Paul.
Yeah.
Paul was quite the opposite. He didn't agree with the idols.
Right.
His spirit was provoked.
Right.
But we talk about this in missiology as bracketing. He bracketed those emotions, set them aside, so that he could enter into a relationship and an encounter with people.
I have been so impressed by this contribution you make on respect. Actually, you qualify dialogue by saying respectful dialogue in your book. And I think later on you mention as one of the characteristics of disciples, the respectful when they go and do evagelism in their different contexts. No?
Yeah.
And one saying we have in our church plant here in Madrid is that we don't have to agree on everything in order to love you or to continue to love each other. That goes to people that believe, people of faith, or people that do not believe, that are not in faith. And I think this aspect of respect really encapsulates it.
So important.
Yeah.
And, it's not just Paul in Acts 17, but in Acts 19 when he's in Ephesus. And we know the story of the riot that nearly occurs. And the townspeople, they grab two of Paul's disciples. They bring him into the theater, and you just know something bad is going to happen until the town clerk intervenes. And he makes the most astounding testimony of Paul's disciples that I think is written in the New Testament.
Wow.
In Acts 19:37, he says that these men were neither blasphemers
Or sacrilegious. Yes.
toward our goddess.
That is powerful.
That is very powerful.
That the town clerk, what would that be equivalent to? The mayor or a local councilman?
Right. Somebody, at least a mayor of a city, coming in to the defense of these disciples, saying that they weren't disrespectful, they're not sacrilegious, they're not blaspheming Artemis.
To have that kind of reputation, and
Right.
you are a church planter in the city.
Yeah. Well, and it goes to tell you how important it is for church planters to have those relationships in the city.
Yeah.
Paul knew the Asiarchs. He wanted to go intervene, and the Asiarchs were saying, Paul, don't do that. But we know from other things in the book of Acts and in the Gospels that having those relationships with key people in the city is very important in church planting.
Thank you, Michael. This is so good. We're looking at the heart of the individual. We're looking at some specifics that are going on during movements, which are this missiological exegesis. I want to shift gears and move into a question, and this made me think of last year. As you know, Pat, Bell, and I invited 6 young leaders from Spain to Cuba to learn from the movement that is going on there. And I remember after 6 days there, we were there with 6 young leaders from Spain. Some are church planting, some are pastoring existing churches, some are leading youth ministries. And I remember the last day in Havana in the airport and having like a little debriefing and we were all going around and saying, so what will it take to start a movement like we just saw in Spain? And I bump into a phrase in your book and says, launching a movement is an act of God. Of God, the Holy Spirit, empowering believers to be witnesses. And it made me think that was actually the conclusion we arrived at.
Yeah, that's what it was
in Havana. We came up and said, one thing we know, it has to be God. But my question for you is, in your research, in your experience, what is our part in terms of launching movements instead of, I want to see a movement in our nation? What is our part, if there is any?
Yeah, there is a part.
Okay.
And I think it's a key part and a very important part. It's looking at what God is already doing.
Okay.
I think this is something that we've forgotten in missions. And I think part of it, I'm just as guilty as anyone. When I moved to Romania in 1990, just right after the revolution, I went there to take the gospel. I had the gospel. In my mind, the Romanians did not have the gospel. They didn't know God. I needed to bring God to them. Yeah. And that was 1990s. I was still in my 20s. Might have been 22 or 23 years old, young, arrogant, proud, ambitious, energetic, and I didn't realize something. I didn't realize that God was already there. If we believe in who God is, we talk about him as being omniscient. He knows everything. He's omnipotent. He's all powerful. He's omnipresent. He's everywhere.
Wow.
And sometimes we forget that one. That there is no place we can go that he is not already there. But there's a fourth one, A friend of mine coined this term, and I'm using it repetitively. He is omnioperatio.
Okay.
He is always...
Tell me more.
Always working.
Okay.
He doesn't stop working.
Wow.
You know, like I, that God desires people to come to salvation more than we do.
That's right.
And if that's true, and if he's genuinely present and working always, he's at work now, doing something already. Our role, Miguel, I think, is that we need to find out what that is. How is God working in our culture? And that goes back to the missiological exegesis. We need to make observations in our culture. Those observations, in a very real sense, can be our observing of what God is doing. And then taking that step of joining him in what he's doing.
That will change your perspective.
That it changes your perspective. And I think it puts it in the right place. You know, in the book, I talk about the difference between an anthropocentric mission and a theocentric mission. An anthropocentric mission is, I have the gospel, I'm taking it someplace, I'm going to tell people about God because they don't know, because he's not there.
Yeah.
I'm going to plant a church.
Those are a lot of assumptions.
A lot of assumptions.
And presumptions.
And presumptions. But the theocentric
Wow.
is saying, you know what? I understand the gospel is eternal. And John tells us this in Revelation 14:6. The gospel is eternal.
Wow.
Jesus is at work in those places. God is present there. Let's put our attention on him. And let's help people see that he's there. The second century church or Christian philosopher by the name of Justin, he becomes known as Justin Martyr because he's martyred.
Church father.
Well, he's
he
prior to
considered?
prior to the church fathers.
Prior.
He's an
Okay.
apologist.
Okay.
Some would talk about him as a church father, but I talk about him as a missionary scholar.
Okay.
Because he was very much on mission.
Prolific as well.
And prolific. But 3 books, but very
Okay.
significant books. But he introduces this idea that we talk about in missiological theology of logos spermatikos. For Justin, logos was Jesus.
Okay.
In that in every culture, there's a seed planted of Jesus. Often, for Justin, it was in the hearts of people. Christ is there already. But Justin realized that not everybody sees it because the demonic places a veil over their eyes.
Which Paul talks about in Romans.
Yeah, in
Among other
Romans
places.
and in 2 Corinthians.
Yeah.
And so what our role
Amazing.
then is, if we genuinely believe that God's at work and he's present, our role is to take that veil off. And to do that, we need to have the language. That's what making those observations, dialoguing with people, reflecting on that, understanding their history, their background.
Is interesting. I've always thought it was God's role to take the veil off. Is it a collaboration with God?
It's a
or
collaboration.
Okay.
Yeah, collaboration with God.
Okay.
There's a beautiful theological term that we've gotten away from. You're getting me all riled up here, brother.
Good. That's what it was all about.
Yeah. There's a beautiful theological term that we've gotten away from called perichoresis. Okay. It's described in many ways, but it's the idea that in describing the Trinity, that the Trinity is mutually indwelling, they're working harmoniously together. Some have described it as the divine dance of how they move and orchestrate and are just beautifully in harmony with each other. When we come to Christ, we know that in John 17, Jesus says, "Let them be one as we are one." we are invited into that perichoretic relationship to work with God in what He's doing on His mission. And that's a beautiful thing to know that I'm in this orchestration that God has been doing, and play an important part.
That's
in
amazing.
that.
So back to Justin, you finished the thought on spermaticus. It's there. It's the seed
there.
that is already there.
The
of
seed
Jesus
is there.
and gospel.
Yeah. It's in the cultures. It's in individuals. We're all created in God's image. We bear that image. However imperfectly we bear it, it's there. People just don't know it yet. And so the role that we have as church planters, as we go into a culture, we make these observations, we're seeing God at work, that we're developing the language that we can utilize then to communicate how God is working. And it's that language then that begins to peel back that veil that's on people's eyes when they begin to see, oh, that's what that is. And we have some beautiful examples in Scripture of this. Let me share just one.
Please.
I'd love to share a couple, but I'll share just one. The story of the Gospel of John. We know it's different from the Synoptics, right?
Yes.
John is actually in the city of Ephesus when he writes it. Jerome tells us a couple centuries later about why that Gospel was written. As Jerome tells us, the leaders of the church in Ephesus come to John. They say, John, write the Gospel. Tell us the story of Jesus. And do you know John's response?
No.
That's what it was. He said, no, I don't want to do that. And they begged him, they pleaded, please write the story of Jesus. And he said, I will do it if you fast and pray. And so
this was at Ephesus.
This was in Ephesus.
Oh, wow.
Ephesus.
How old was John at this time?
He's an older man.
Okay.
Yeah, older man. Probably not quite at the end of his life, but he's getting up there.
Okay.
And so the leaders pray and fast. And when they break that fasting, Jerome tells us that John begins to write, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So significant. What he wrote there because of the context of Ephesus. Now, back up 600 years. 600 years before John gets to Ephesus, there's a philosopher by the name of Heraclitus. Heraclitus writes a book called On Nature. That book, after he finishes it, he puts it in the Temple of Artemis, where often education would occur, so that anybody who came to Ephesus could read his philosophy about nature. And in that book of philosophy, he writes about the Logos philosophy. And the way in which he describes the Logos is that from the Logos comes everything.
Interesting.
Advanced 600 years.
Wow.
John's in Ephesus, and he writes, in the beginning was the Logos. And the Logos was with God. The Logos was God.
Wow.
What John is doing is he's peeling back. He's in essence saying, you Ephesians, you've known about the Logos now for 600 years. You've read it in Heraclitus, but now what you have known implicitly in your culture, I'm making explicit. The Logos is Jesus Christ.
Wow.
And
wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. And I think that's the role that the church planter plays. We see culture, we look at culture, we see things going on. We may not agree with it, but if we really believe God is present, and not only present, but He's working.
Already working.
Then we have to say, yes, we can see God there. Maybe it's distorted. So let's engage it.
Amazing.
Let's reveal it. Let's go to people and say, hey, look, the things that you're doing, we see that you're searching. We know that you're hungry, you're desirous. Let me show you what it is that you're really searching for.
Wow.
And
Wow.
and we talk now. Just recently, I wrote an article with a colleague that the title of it was Revisiting Contextualization. And we're trying to move people away from contextualizing, because that becomes a human practice. I contextualize the gospel to these people. Therefore, the way in which I've contextualized should be the way in which the gospel is understood.
Huh.
So we're moving away from that to what we call missiological parallelisms.
Okay.
And that's a big kind of concept. But basically what it is, it's looking for parallels in culture. John saw it with the Logos. And so he declared what was implicit in the culture to be explicitly Christ.
Okay.
So the Logos that Heraclitus told you about, Jesus is the better Logos. So what we're talking about now in our missions is, how do we show that Jesus is better than what it is that people are searching for?
Wow.
And whatever that might be: community, relationships, love, significance, whatever it might be. Purpose. Jesus shows you a better way.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
You said you had more.
Yeah.
But I want to get into a couple of more things that I have here. This is so rich. And it is fascinating how in the book of Efesiología you delve into all these things that blossomed out of. I don't think it was until I read Efesiología that I was aware that John, the evangelist, was part of that whole ecosystem, and among other things.
Yeah, you bring that up, and I can remember when I first got into church planting, and I was reading about it in the late 80s, 90s took the step toward church planting. Everybody wanted to be the Antioch church, right? Do you remember that?
Yes.
We want to be the Antioch church.
Yeah,
we want
the
to be
missionary
the church.
church.
We want to be the church that sends out missionaries.
Correct.
What I'm sharing with people today is we need to move on. Let's be the Ephesian church, because it's that Ephesian church that we begin to see churches planted all over Asia Minor.
Wow.
It's not only Ephesus, but it becomes Colossae, Laodicea, Hierapolis. And then we know later in church history we have Smyrna and Sardis. Then
All those come from that.
all those come
movement
from
in Ephesus.
All started in Ephesus. Magnesia, Trellis, Priene, Didyma, Miletus, and
Wow.
all of these churches start out of that movement that began in Ephesus. Yeah. So we want to be Ephesian.
What a fascinating
Ephesian
study.
churches.
Thank you for planting that seed, Michael. I think this will be good for many to go more in depth and do that contrast of what's the Antioch church, as I'm hearing you, is more like a hub that sent missionaries, but as opposed to Ephesus became a hub that was part of more of an ecosystem, as opposed to just a launching pad and creating a sustainable ecosystem. No?
Right.
This is what I'm hearing you.
Yep. That's a great way to put it.
And what a great perspective for a church plant that is birthed, to say we want to be part of an ecosystem that is sustainable in time, and not only a launching pad that sends people and which had its place, and I think it was part of the learning curve of the missiology of the day.
I'm sure. Yeah.
Now, what I wanted to ask you, I told you about Cuba. We were there, and we said our main purpose there with the 6 Spanish young leaders was going to be a training time to learn, to glean patterns, resources, principles. You talk about indigenous movements at some point in your writings, in your research. What is some advice you would give to avoid? I go to a place where God is moving in a particular way, and just go and do a copy and a paste. What are some things to avoid and maybe some things to do pay attention? Aside from the things you've already shared.
Yeah. Well, avoid all of that. Do something different. Yeah, that is. I mean, we're creatures of habit, aren't we? I remember again reflecting,
and we're very visual also. If we see something working, we want to implement it.
Oh, yeah.
In all the aspects of life, not only in mission and gospel.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I did that in church planting. I don't know if you know this or not, but I planted the New Testament church in Romania.
Oh, you did?
I did.
Finally.
I did. I did. That was my intention, and I believed that. And over time, I began to realize, that New Testament church looks a lot like the church I came from in the States. And it's true. It did. And the sad thing is that as I have opportunity to travel around the world, one of the things that I notice is that I can walk into a church in a village outside of Kathmandu, and there'll be loudspeakers and mixing tables and electric piano and guitars and microphones and all of these things. And it looks very similar to what I experience in the Western church.
Wow. Yeah.
And so what we've been talking more about, and increasing numbers of us are talking about this, the idea of adaptive ecclesiology. And what we're trying to get at is that if God is working in different places, uniquely working in different places, then our response should be a unique response. So what I do in Madrid should not look like what I do in Bucharest.
Wow.
Shouldn't look like what I do in Berlin, because God's working differently in those places. People are different in those places. And so we need to think a little bit more about what is community going to look like. Now, there are, where people are wired for community, but they express that community in different ways. And that's what we're looking for, is how are people expressing community where they are? And then what does that look like if we were to say, the church is there. Let's put the church in that. And that's one of the issues that we have to move away from, is really redefine the way in which we think about church. Okay. The church isn't a place where we go. It's not a building, and we know this. Yeah. It's a people. Yeah. It's who we are.
Correct.
It's our identity. And so when I talk about the church planter's role and the role of the church, I look at that as the body of Christ, given the responsibility to incarnate Christ in a location. Mm-hmm. And so if we think about what Christ did, he came from heaven, right? He incarnated in a Jewish culture. Wow. He did Jewish things. He wore Jewish clothing.
Full on.
He spoke Hebrew, Aramaic. Wow. He did all of these things in those cultures. Now, as an individual, I can't do that if I go to another culture. We lived in Romania 10 years. I'm thankful I still speak Romanian as broken as it is now. But, in those 10 years, I never became a Romanian. I couldn't. It wasn't my experience. But when we come together as a body of Christ, when Romanians could come together, then they can incarnate in that culture because they know it, they understand it. Wow. And then we can see it adapt to that culture.
Yes. Wow. This is so good. Anything you would keep from the experience that we had in Cuba, or you may have had in Nepal when you went and saw the movement of God there? We joked about avoid all that.
Yeah.
But anything you would keep, or anything you would say, okay, this I want to incorporate.
Yeah, as a missiologist, I always think about the context.
Okay.
Every context is going to be different. Now, we might be able to think of some principles and think of ways in which things are adapted.
Okay.
But we always have to take into consideration the context. So let me give you a biblical example. When Paul planted churches in Galatia, for example, they looked very different than in Asia Minor. And those looked different from the church in Macedonia and that from the church in Corinth. And how did it look different? Well, take, for example, the leadership. In Galatia, Paul appointed elders. But in Asia Minor, there was a bishop, there were elders, and there were deacons.
Wow.
That was an adaptation. And those, interestingly enough, I study a lot of epigraphic inscriptions and other things. And one of the things that we've come to learn is that those positions of bishop or overseer, elder, and deacon, they were civil positions.
Oh, wow.
They weren't church positions.
Okay.
Paul used those words because people understood what they meant in that community.
It was
so he adapted that.
Okay.
And then in Philippi, he writes to the Philippians. He addresses the letter to the bishops, plural, and to the deacons. And there were not any elders there.
Interesting.
So another
adaptation.
So some
to the local reality.
Yeah, and that's what you take. That's the principle that you take from Cuba and you bring to Spain. You adapt to the local reality.
Wow.
So what is it? So the question then to ask is, what is it that they did there that we need to adapt here?
There you go. Okay.
Not cookie cutter. Don't do what they did.
Correct.
Adapt what they did.
Correct.
But base it on the observations, the dialogue, the understanding of the people, and make that adjustment.
Yeah, that is good. It's already making me think about some principles that can be transferable and gleaned from. Michael, there's a last question I want to ask you. More than a question, it's a word of encouragement I want you to give looking to this camera. This is a very face-to-face, heart-to-heart fashion to a leader that has been praying for maybe years, maybe decades, to see a movement of God in Spain. What would be those words of maybe encouragement you would give to those leaders, those men and women in Spain that have been praying and waiting and expecting a move of God? You know, we're saying lately, a lot of people are saying Europe is post-Christian, Spain is post-Christian. A lot of us are saying it's pre-awakening. We are in a moment where God is on the move and we are expectant. And nevertheless, we haven't seen that in Spain, at least in the recent history. What would you tell a leader? What's that word of encouragement to those leaders?
Yeah, great. Brothers and sisters, I do want to encourage you. I love hearing what Miguel was saying, that there's an anticipation, a pre-awakening perhaps that's taking place here. But keep this in mind. God has not stopped working here. He hasn't. It might feel like that, and I know. I mean, I've lived in Europe. I don't know the Spanish context, but I know enough of the European context where at times it feels like that God's not working. But that can't be the case. He has to always be working or he would not be God. So he's working. Be faithful. Look for that. Pray that God would give you the eyes and the heart and the ears to see what it is that he is doing, and join with him and be encouraged. Alongside of that, continue to love people, love the brothers and sisters, love your neighbors. Do those Jesus-y things that you see your master doing.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael.
Yeah.
I'm already thinking of the next invitation we're going to make you to the podcast.
Okay.
We haven't you just touched the surface of archaeology and what archaeology is teaching you, showing you about church planting movements. And I would love to do something on that in our next visit. I want to thank you so much for being
brother.
with us. Love you, brother. We do have a tradition, and we do. We ask the guest to recommend a book, but today I'm going to recommend the book, and it's Efesiología, a study of the Ephesus movement. It has come out of the oven in Spanish just a few months ago. Efesiología, el estudio del movimiento en Éfeso. You cannot miss it. It will be a propelling fuel to the mission God has called us all to, of seeing, experiencing church planting movements in Spain and seeing Him glorified and magnified in this nation. So, Michael, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Blessings to you and Lori. May God continue to use you in beautiful and so unique ways.
Yeah, thank you, brother.